You almost scrolled past this. Your thumb was already moving. And something stopped it. Not the music, not the title. Something underneath all of that. Something that has been quiet in you for a long time, maybe years. Suddenly sat up and paid attention. You don't have a name for it. But you felt it, a little catch in your chest, a sense that this one is for you. I want to talk to you about that feeling. Because you have spent most of your life being told it was nothing. You've been told you were too sensitive, too much, too deep for the room you were standing in. You've sat at dinner tables, where everyone was laughing and somehow felt completely alone. You've walked through your own house at 2 in the morning, while the people you love slept, carrying something you couldn't put into words. And you started to wonder if there was something wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. What you have been carrying is not a defect. It's a calling. And tonight I want to help you see it for what it is. Because I believe you found your way here at the exact moment you were supposed to. The number 144,000 shows up in the book of Revelation, and people argue about it endlessly. Is it literal? Is it symbolic? Scholars have built whole careers on that question. I'm not going to do that to you tonight. I'm not a man of charts and timelines. I'm a man who has sat with too many people in too many living rooms, holding their hands while they cried, to care much about the math. Here's what I know. Whatever that number means, it points to a truth that runs all the way through Scripture. That sets people apart. He always has. He looks at an ordinary person, in an ordinary place, doing ordinary things, and he marks them for something. Not because they earned it. Not because they were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most religious. He just sees them. He knew them before they were born. And he set a weight on them that the rest of the world cannot understand. And if you are sitting there right now, feeling that catch in your chest, I think you already know which side of that you fall on. Let me tell you about a man named Gideon. When God called Gideon, he found him hiding, literally hiding, down in a winepress, threshing wheat where no one could see him. Because the enemy was all around and Gideon was afraid. He was the least in his family. His family was the least in the whole tribe. By every measure that the world uses, Gideon was a nobody, in a corner, trying not to be noticed. And the angel of the Lord walks up to this terrified man hiding in a hole in the ground and says, "Lord is with you, mighty warrior, mighty warrior." Think about that for a second. Gideon doesn't feel like a mighty warrior. He feels like a frightened man who can't catch a break. And God doesn't call him what he feels like. God calls him what he is, what he was made to be, what was sealed inside him long before fear ever taught him to hide. That's the part most people miss. God doesn't speak to your circumstances. He speaks to your calling. He looks past the version of you that's exhausted and overlooked and doubting, and he addresses the one he made on purpose. And notice what God did not do. He didn't wait for Gideon to come out of the winepress first. He didn't say, "Clean yourself up, stop being afraid, and then I'll call you something." He met Gideon in the hole. He spoke the name over a man who was still trembling, still hiding, still convinced he was the least of the least. I think about the people I've sat with who needed to hear exactly that. The single mother working a double shift, who hasn't slept right in 3 years, who feels like a failure because she can't be everything to everyone. The man laid off at 58, who sits in his truck in the driveway for 10 extra minutes, because he can't bear to walk in the front door and feel useless in front of his own family again. The teenager who's the only one in the youth group who actually feels something real during worship and hides it because the others would laugh. God doesn't wait for any of them to get it together. He walks right into the winepress. He's already in yours. You just got so used to the dark in there that you stopped expecting him to show up. So let me ask you something honest. How many times has someone called you mighty in your real life? At your job, in your family? How many times has anyone looked at you and named the thing God put inside you? Probably never. And that silence has done something to you. It's made you small in your own eyes. You learned to shrink. You learned to apologize for taking up space. You learned to swallow the things you sense, the things you know, because every time you spoke them out loud, someone made a face. But the silence of people is not the verdict of God. I need you to hear that again, slower. The silence of people is not the verdict of God. Just because nobody around you ever named it, doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes God hides his best work in the people the world overlooks completely. Precisely so that when it finally comes out, everyone knows it could only have come from him. There's a woman in the Bible most people skip right over. Her name was Hannah. Hannah wanted a child and couldn't have one. And in her culture, that was the deepest kind of shame. Year after year, she went up to the house of the Lord, and year after year, she came home with empty arms. There was another woman in the household who had children, and that woman tormented her about it. Day in, day out, picked at the wound. And one day Hannah had had enough. She went into the temple and she prayed, but she didn't pray out loud. She was so broken that her lips were moving and no sound was coming out. Just this silent, desperate pouring out of a soul that had nothing left. And the priest who saw her, Eli, assumed she was drunk. Read that again. The one person in that building, whose entire job was to recognize a move of God, looked at the most genuine prayer in the room and thought she was a drunk woman embarrassing herself. How many of you have lived that exact moment? You were doing the realest thing you'd ever done. You were the most honest with God you'd ever been. And the people who were supposed to understand you the most looked at you and got it completely wrong. They saw a problem. They saw something to fix, something to be ashamed of, something off. And they missed entirely that they were standing in front of a person God was about to use to change history. Because Hannah's silent prayer, that one nobody understood, gave birth to Samuel. And Samuel anointed kings. The whole direction of a nation turned on a prayer that a priest mistook for drunkenness. You don't always know what your hidden moments are growing into. The nights you cried where no one heard you. The prayers you whispered that felt like they hit the ceiling and fell back down. The longing you've carried that you can't explain to anyone. You think those are signs that nothing is happening. What if they're the exact opposite? What if every one of those moments has been God doing in secret what He's about to reveal in the open? Here's where it gets real. I think a lot of you have been waiting for permission. You've been waiting for someone with authority to walk into your life and say the words you've been aching to hear. That you're not crazy, that you're not too much, that the thing you feel is real and it has a purpose, and your time is not as far off as you fear. I want to be that voice for a minute, because I don't think you found this video by ordinary means. Let me tell you who I am. My name is George. I've spent more years than I can count sitting with people exactly like you. People who feel everything, who carry burdens that aren't even theirs, who walk into a room and know something is wrong before anyone says a word. The world calls that anxiety. The world calls it being overly emotional. I've watched the church itself sometimes call it instability. I call it discernment. I call it a gift that was never properly named, given to people who were never properly seen. And here's what I've learned standing in all those living rooms. The people God marks almost always go through a season where they feel the most lost, right before the calling becomes clear. There's a stretch where everything feels like it's falling apart. You feel disconnected from the people you used to be close to. Old friendships don't fit anymore. Things that used to satisfy you feel hollow. You're not depressed exactly. You're just done with a version of life you've outgrown, and you don't yet have the new one to step into. That's not you breaking down. That's you being repositioned. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. Now stay with me, because I'm not done. I want to talk about Moses for a minute, because Moses understood being marked and then being hidden better than almost anyone. Moses was born under a death sentence. The order had gone out. Every Hebrew baby boy was to be killed. And his mother, instead of giving up, made a basket, waterproofed it, put her infant son inside, and floated him down the very river where the danger was. Think about the faith that takes. She didn't have a plan. She had a calling she sensed in her child, and a stubborn refusal to let the world's death sentence be the final word over him. She couldn't keep him, and she couldn't save him by holding on, so she did the hardest thing a mother can do. She let go, and she trusted the river to a God she couldn't see, and the baby ended up in the arms of the very household that wanted him dead. Raised in the palace of the people who were oppressing his own. For 40 years Moses lived as a prince, and then it all fell apart, and he ran into the desert, and for another 40 years he was a shepherd in the middle of nowhere. 80 years, most of his life, hidden, tending other people's sheep on the backside of a mountain, probably certain that whatever he was supposed to be, he had missed it. And then a bush caught fire and didn't burn up. Here's what I want you to take from that. Moses didn't get his moment at 20, when he felt strong. He didn't get it at 40, when he had the palace and the power. He got it at 80, when by every human standard his best years were behind him. So if you've been telling yourself it's too late, that you wasted too much time, that you took too long to figure it out, that the calling passed you by while you were busy surviving, I need you to look at Moses and let that lie die tonight. God's timing is not your timing. The years you think you wasted, he was using. The desert wasn't punishment. It was preparation. The man who walked out of that wilderness to stand in front of Pharaoh was not the same man who ran into it. The hiding made him. And maybe, just maybe, your hidden years have been making you too. I think about Joseph in the same breath. Sold by his own brothers, thrown in a pit, shipped off as a slave, lied about, thrown in prison, forgotten by the one man who promised to remember him. Years of it. A young man who'd had dreams of greatness, watching every door slam in his face, one after another. And from the inside of that story, it looked like ruin. It looked like a life going nowhere. It looked like God had forgotten the promises he'd put in a boy's heart. But you and I get to see the whole thing. We get to read the last chapter. And we know that every single betrayal, every closed door, every unjust season was God moving Joseph into position to save not only his own family, but an entire region from famine. When Joseph finally faced the brothers who'd sold him, he didn't say, "Look what you did to me." He said something far greater. He said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." Sit with how long that took, though, because we read it in a few minutes, and it sounds clean. It was not clean. There were years in that prison when Joseph had no idea the story would end well. He had a dream as a boy, and then watched life do everything in its power to bury it. He interpreted a dream for a man who walked free and promised to put in a good word, and then forgot him for 2 more years. 2 years. Do you know what 2 years feels like when you're innocent and waiting? It feels like God closed the book on you. But God was reading a different chapter than Joseph could see. Every delay was a setup. The timing that felt cruel from inside the cell was actually precise from above. Joseph couldn't be released one day too early, because Egypt wasn't hungry yet. The famine that would make him second in command hadn't started. He wasn't being forgotten. He was being kept, held in place until the exact moment his gift would land where it could save the most lives. You may be in the middle of your pit right now. You may be in the part of the story where it makes no sense, where the people who should have protected you didn't, where the door you were sure God would open stayed locked, and you don't understand why. And I can't stand here and pretend that part doesn't hurt. It hurts. It's supposed to hurt. I won't insult you by dressing it up. But I can tell you that the pit is not the end of your story. It's the middle. And the one who's writing it has never once written a wasted chapter. Now I want to come back to that feeling I started with. The catch in your chest. The sense that this one was for you. Because here's something I've noticed about the people God sets apart. They almost never feel chosen. They feel weird. They feel out of step. They feel like they're watching life through a window instead of living it. They feel things too deeply and care too much, and can't seem to numb themselves the way everyone around them does. And every one of those things you've been told is a weakness. I'm telling you, it's the fingerprint of a calling. You feel everything because you were built to carry the weight of other people. You see what's coming because you were given eyes for it. You can't settle into the shallow life because you were made for a deep one. The very things that have made you feel like an outsider your whole life are the things God is about to use. Elijah felt it too. Right after the greatest victory of his life, calling down fire from heaven in front of an entire nation, Elijah ran into the wilderness, sat under a tree, and asked God to let him die. The mightiest prophet of his age, completely empty, convinced he was the only one left who hadn't given up. And do you know what God said to him? He didn't rebuke him. He didn't lecture him about his lack of faith right after the man had given everything he had. He fed him. He let him sleep. He sent an angel to make him a meal and told him to rest. Because sometimes the holiest thing a worn-out person can do is eat something and lie down, and only then gently. He told Elijah something that I think every single one of you needs to hear tonight. He said, "There are 7,000 others. 7,000 who haven't bowed down. 7,000 you don't even know about." Elijah thought he was alone. He was certain of it. He had counted, and the count came back. 1, just me. And he was wrong by a factor of 7,000. He was part of a remnant he couldn't see, scattered across a country, each one probably feeling exactly as alone as he did. And so are you. That loneliness you've felt, the sense that nobody else gets it, that you're the only one carrying this. It's just a feeling, but it's a lie as a fact. There are others, right now, watching this same message, feeling the same catch in their chest, wondering the same thing you're wondering. You are not the only one. You never were. You're part of something far bigger than the small, isolated story your loneliness has been telling you. God has never once worked through a person who felt qualified. He works through the hidden, the overlooked, the too sensitive, the ones who ran, the ones who waited too long, the ones who prayed silent prayers that everyone misunderstood. That's not the exception in Scripture. That's the entire pattern. So let me ask you the thing I really want you to sit with. What if the season you're in right now, the one that feels like falling apart, like loneliness, like being misunderstood, like waiting far too long, what if that's not the absence of God in your life? What if it's the winepress where Gideon was hiding when the angel showed up? What if it's the desert where Moses became who he was meant to be? What if it's the pit right before the palace? I'm not going to promise you that lightning is going to strike at a particular minute. That's not how he works, and you've been promised too many cheap things by too many people already. What I'll tell you is something truer and harder and better. The God who marked you before you were born has not forgotten where you are. The hidden season is not the end, and the catch you felt in your chest when you almost scrolled past this, I don't believe that was an accident. Some things reach your eyes, and some things reach all the way down to the part of you that's been waiting a very long time to be told the truth. Before you go, I want you to do something for me, and I want you to be specific. In the comments, tell me about the one moment, the single moment in your life, when you felt the most alone in the very thing God may have been calling you to. Not your whole story, just that one moment. The dinner table where you felt invisible, the prayer no one heard, the night you walked the house while everyone slept, the room where you knew something everyone else missed. Write it down. One moment. Be specific. I don't want the summary, I want the scene. Because I read these, every one of them. And because I think when you finally name out loud the place you felt most alone, you're going to discover something that changes everything. You were never alone there at all. I'll be looking for yours.